Coming up on Kentucky Outlook, with less than 1 week before Kentucky voters help to decide the makeup of the U.S. Senate and a number of local and state races, the candidates are scurrying to woo the undecided voters in their last-minute campaign swings throughout the Commonwealth. Well, the national limelight is shining on the battle between incumbent U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell and current Secretary of State Allison Lundergan Grimes. The relative newcomer Grimes has been gaining on the polls, but the indicators are that it's too close to call. Coming up on Kentucky Outlook, we'll take a look at the midterm elections. Stay with us. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Kentucky Outlook. I'm Barbara Deeb. We're glad you joined us. In the end, it really comes down to the votes. Who shows up to cast a ballot? Reporting an increase in absentee ballots today, we heard from the state. And it looks like the polls on November 4th are going to be an interesting place to be. We'll talk about that as we welcome to the program the head of WKU's Political Science Department, Dr. Sandra Ardrey joins us. Thank you for being here. In addition, we are joined by Dr. Joel Turner, also with the Political Science Department. Thank you for being here. And a student. We have a student who happens to be in Dr. Ardrey's campaign management course, Tyler Pedigo. And if I'm not mistaken, you are actively working on a current campaign.
That's correct. A couple at this time.
A couple. Good for you. So, you know, as we got started, before we started recording the program, we were talking about Ebola, how suddenly that has become an issue in the campaign, a lot of other issues as well. But before we go any further, put it in context for us, Dr. Ardrey. We have what we call midterm elections. We have primaries. There are a lot of people out there who are wanting to have primaries done away with. But why the need for a primary?
Well, I guess especially when you have several candidates within the party, it allows the party and the party faithfuls to decide who will represent that party. And so you have that primary to winnow out those candidates. And so you come down with one strong candidate so that that candidate can then oppose the other candidate. And so you have two strong candidates that come out of that process. They've already been sort of vetted in the primary.
So people calling for doing away with primaries, then how would you'd have everybody then in the general election?
Well, you'd have everybody in the general election. Yeah. I guess that would be possible. But that would, one of the reasons that folks want to do away with the primary is that here in America, in our democracy, we have so many elections. We've got general election, primaries, we've got runoffs, that sort of thing. So that would actually limit the number of elections and the amount of noise on the media.
The noise, she called it. You agree?
Well, I think that the bigger issue in Kentucky, in terms of instead of getting away from the primaries, is we have closed primaries. So Republicans are allowed to vote if you're registered Republicans, Democrats if you're registered Democrat, but independents aren't allowed to vote. They can't participate in the primary, so they really have no role in picking who the Republican or Democratic nominee is going to be. There are strengths and weaknesses to that system. I mean, on some level, you like the fact that only Republicans get to pick Republican candidates and Democrats get to pick Democratic candidates. So basically, you shouldn't be able to pick your players if you're not willing to sign up for the team, for lack of a better term. But within there's the rise of independents. If you figure that a quarter to a third of the voters are independents, they get shut out of the primaries. So that's why a lot of those are upset about not being able to participate in the structure that we have in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, in our sister PBS station, KET was in the news and was involved in a lawsuit as a result of excluding a particular candidate who did not meet their qualifications. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it runs the course throughout there. Were you going to say something?
No, I think as we see the number of independents grow, that we will have a change in that system. If it's going to be still remain closed, then allow the independents to say declare for just one, and they can vote either in the primary for the Republicans or the Democrats. So we'll probably see some differences in that as the independents gain more strength.
As independents gain more strength and as we see more representative people getting there, like students. And that's where I was going with that, Tyler. You are from the Glasgow area. You are studying political science. You're hoping to go to graduate school. How old are you?
I'm 25, actually.
25.
I'm a late bloomer.
But nonetheless, you're a 25-year-old who's involved in the process. What are you seeing from your peers?
I'm seeing a lot of involvement, and I really do think it's important that we as students become involved because, you know, in politics, there's some issues that are sort of inherently student specific, whether you're talking about interest rates on student loans or tuition costs or just education funding in general. So you have to ask yourself, should we have this burden of representation on these issues shouldered by a different part of the electorate? And, you know, I, like several of my colleagues on the campaign, don't think so. We think that students need to sort of step up to the plate and take responsibility and let our voices be heard.
Thinking and doing are two different things.
That's
so you
right.
can think that, but are you seeing this from your peers, from your cohort?
I think so. I think a lot of us are involved, and you know, as the election day draws closer, I think there's more and more involvement. So
Interesting.
so.
And of course, when there are exciting races, that kind of gets people
Absolutely.
involved in the process too. But as we're seeing the campaign slogans, the campaign commercials, the signs, the negativity, why would anybody want to run for office? Do you ever ask yourselves that? I'm hoping you have a good answer.
Well, I don't know if there are any really good answers, but as we see the negativity increase, the worry is that the really good candidates, the really good people that really want to get into it for the right reason, to make an improvement and to do some type of social change, those folks are going to be scared away from the process because, first of all, it's very, very expensive. We've spent, what, $30-some million in the senatorial race. We spent a lot of money at the local level. And so the money is one thing, but then all of the negativity, the toll that that takes on you emotionally, the toll that it takes on your family. So you really have to have a thick skin and have to commit at age 16 or 17 not to ever do anything wrong.
Don't do anything bad.
Wrong, right. Don't have a life, don't have a college life, so.
And I think what you're really pointing the finger at here is the personal, how personal
It
these
gets
races
personal.
have become.
Yes, exactly.
You know, used to be you'd kind of dance around the perimeter, but you wouldn't get that personal. Not so
Yeah.
anymore.
When I tell my students in the campaign management class that you never get personal, that you always keep it very professional, those kinds of things, and we see all of that going out the window now,
Right.
with especially at the what is it, the race with in Barron County between Johnny Bell and Jeffrey Job? Is it?
Yeah.
Joe.
Yes.
My goodness, that
course,
is
with
just
the
vicious.
DUIs and all
Yes,
that good stuff.
DUIs and domestic violence. So.
Yeah, that's our state house. I mean, job. It's not like this for Senate Majority Leader. That's that job or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. What's it? If you're not qualified for anything else, run for political office. So I mean, you could share some of it could scare some of the candidates away. But that's just part of it now. I mean, it's a different world than just 20, 30 years ago in terms of social media and some of the things candidates get caught doing or messing up, or even if it's not the candidates, it could be their campaigns. And this is getting hugely expensive. I think I saw a stat on the news today that North Carolina, there's over $100 million that's been spent on that race, and that's the most expensive Senate seat or Senate race in history. And it's not for somebody who's in a leadership position or anything like that. So, I mean, it's getting to be, that's why we have these calls for campaign finance reform, because of all the money that gets dumped into it. Now, whether or not that's legal to do, and that's another question, but it's obvious why people want that sort of thing, because of the sheer amount of money. And it prices, I mean, in addition to people sort of not wanting to put their families through the rigors of a campaign, it also prices a lot of people out. I mean, people who, if you're not rich, you don't have a shot to run.
Campaign management course is a class that you're teaching and a class that you're taking, Tyler. You're working on two campaigns. You know, you brought up a point about how sometimes it is not just the candidate themselves who fall victim, but if it's someone in their campaign. You're working on two campaigns right now. You've worked and observed many. It's difficult to keep tabs on everyone who's in your campaign.
Yep.
How do you do that?
Tyler, you want to go?
I don't know. I think that Rand Paul had ran into some issues in months past, correct? If
Sure.
anybody can corroborate that.
And
with
Allison
that-
Grimes' campaign now,
Yeah, the
with the two
coal,
workers with
yeah.
the coal. And,
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
some people that have
Who were
appeared on
excellent.
commercials and
Right.
everything. But I don't know. I guess that's sort of just left up to the organizational.
Well, I'm
structure.
curious, and you don't have to tell us which two campaigns you're working on, but when you get on board, do they tell you, you know, ethically, morally, everything you do is representative of this campaign?
No, but I think it's understood. You know, at least everybody I've worked with has enough sense to know that you know, be on your toes, because when you're out there knocking on doors or making calls, what you say and do is representative of, well, not necessarily representative, but it's at least perceived that way, that
Sure
it's
it is.
represented, that the candidate is being represented by your words. At
You know,
that time.
anytime we've asked for access to students working on the campaigns, for example, the Talisman, the yearbook here at Western, wanted to do a piece on students that are working in the campaigns. Both campaigns stopped that. No media access, no cameras, no nothing. And so Mitch McConnell's campaign told us no. Alison Grimes' campaign told us no. So especially for those two campaigns, they're keeping very, very tight lid on it.
Yeah. It's hard to, I mean, you got so many people working on these campaigns, and it's not even like the higher ups you have to worry about. There are volunteers and people putting out signs and making phone calls. That these candidates have no idea who they are or what they're saying. They're just hoping they're saying the right things. I guess on some level that's why prayer is important with campaigns, and just pray that everything goes well and hope you don't run counter or anything like that. But even with the Grimes thing, the people who were making those comments, they weren't high-ranking officials in the campaign. They were
But nonetheless,
portrayed
they
as
were
such, and that's how it
represented.
comes
Yeah,
off, and that's
yeah.
what's important, not actually sort of what actually the truth is. It's just the portrayal of it and how it's perceived. And it's perceived to be a
Perception.
huge deal.
Perceived reality.
Yep.
While we're speaking about perceived reality, let's talk about the reality of what are some of the issues that you think are really front and center in this current campaign, and I mean across the board. Because we could talk about the Grimes-McConnell race, and there are certainly a lot of issues there. But in general, what are people hearing? What are they saying? Jobs?
Well, we did recently our Big Red poll, which was the big election poll on the campaign. The three issues that came up more than anything else that we looked at were the economy, jobs, and the international affairs.
International affairs.
Yeah, where people are terrified about the ISIS situation with terrorism, and then you also can, I guess, you can theoretically put Ebola in there as well. So people are upset. I mean, those are the things they're concerned about.
But I've got to know, was that up there in the top 3 in previous polls?
No, well, international affairs is always up toward the top. It's usually the economy and jobs.
Yeah.
Those are usually the most important. It's not uncommon, given the atmosphere that we have now, for international affairs.
Yeah, I'm not
to be-
surprised,
yeah,
but
to
I'm
be-
just
Yeah.
curious about
to be
that.
up there as well.
You know, it's interesting that Obama is not campaigning in one senatorial race.
Yep.
I think it was worthy of national news that he made one campaign stop sometime this week, but it wasn't for a senatorial race. And so I think it shows that there's I think they're calling it a crisis of competence. And we were talking about the Ebola. And I don't think it's necessarily the Ebola crisis that's the issue, but it's just that fits in with, we had the Affordable Care Act. That was the rollout. I mean, the program is good, but the rollout was less than perfect. There was the VA scandal, the IRS scandal, the Secret Service scandal. You've got immigration, you got ISIS, and so Ebola is just one more thing that makes it look like that we can't trust Obama, and I guess by reference the Democrats to give
Take
us
care of
good,
business.
to do good stewardship. And so I think 58% of all the people now say that that they don't trust Obama to do the right thing, that he's handling it inefficiently, and that goes up to 60-some% here in Kentucky that don't favor him. So I think Mitch McConnell's doing a great job in tying Alison Grimes to the Obama campaign.
Well, then, go ahead.
Look, that's what they're trying to do. McConnell's trying to nationalize the race, and Grimes is trying to personalize it. She's trying to make it her versus McConnell, and he's trying to make it McConnell versus Obama. And where the people go is going to dictate how this works out. President Obama's approval rating in this state is like in the 40s, and disapproval of his job performance is in the high 60s. 83% of Kentuckians think that the country is on the wrong track, which is about 20 points higher than the national average.
83% of Kentuckians think the country is on the wrong track.
And I think a third of those are Democrats. I mean, so the Democrats also are having problems with.
It's not just Republicans.
Yeah, it's not just Republicans.
Driving the bus on this. People in Kentucky don't trust what's happening at the federal level. They think that the state should be allowed to do more things, which is not something commonly associated with President Obama. So it's a key. I mean, it's a big issue. When it gets to the point where your candidates, who voted for the president, are unwilling to say they did that, that's a concern. I mean, that's a huge issue. Even when George W. Bush was his most unpopular, he was still campaigning for people.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
so he was still making stops. But President Obama's not doing any of this.
And that doesn't that doesn't bode well for I think we need the Republicans need what, 9 seats to take over?
6.
6.
Yep.
Okay, to take over
The majority of the
majority.
Senate.
And I think Nate Silver is predicting that
Yeah.
the Republicans will take over the Senate.
So there's method in the madness in tying, and McConnell's camp was very masterful in doing so, tying McConnell's opponent, Allison Lundergan Grimes, to Obama. Okay, but let's bring it on home to Kentucky now. With 83% of Kentuckians not happy with what's happening at the national level, how do you think that's going to shake out come Tuesday, November 4th?
Well, what we found, it clearly shows the people who aren't happy with the direction of the country are blaming the president on that, and that's shifting over toward Secretary Grimes. Those people are, if you're not happy with the track that the country's on, McConnell does very well among those voters. And what it indicates is that people aren't necessarily blaming him. They're not blaming the Congress, they're blaming the president, which is not uncommon because we've seen this with past presidents in terms of midterm elections and presidential performance. The president's kind of like the quarterback of a football team. You get too much credit and too much blame. I think the blame is clearly going to Obama on this, and by proxy, it's hurting Secretary Grimes.
Especially here in Kentucky.
Oh yes, here in Kentucky.
I
really.
think at the beginning of the month, the gap between McConnell and Grimes was just sort of one point.
Yeah, it wasn't much. It was,
and now it's widened to
winning.
4, 4 points. And so I think they're doing a masterful job in connecting her to Obama.
And they're out campaigning. When I said wooing those undecideds, there's still those undecideds there that they want to woo.
Just before we came in, I checked. In the last 24 hours, Grimes has spent $31,000. McConnell has spent $427,000 just in the last 24 hours.
Wow.
And that's why we can see that poll, the distance is growing, and he's peaking just in the nick of time.
Yep.
Okay, peaking just in the nick of time, which speaks to the importance of the media campaign. You gotta get the word out. And don't you think people have been inundated with this thus far?
Oh yeah, people have already been complaining for a long time.
A long time, yeah.
But we've seen the tone of McConnell's campaign change. It's a kinder, gentler sort of Mitch that's being touted. Have you seen some of the new spots?
The new Bloodhound ad and all that good
And
stuff.
just for our audience who may not be aware of the Bloodhound, the new Bloodhound ad, back when McConnell was first voted into office, a lot of people attributed that win to the spot that he did with the Bloodhound saying, "Where's Dee?" talking about Dee Huddleston, who was the incumbent. And
You know who ran that campaign?
No.
James Carville.
James Carville.
That was his first.
Right.
That was his first campaign.
And it was quite successful. So now we have a new Bloodhound commercial, which I have yet
I
to
have not
see.
seen that.
Yeah, it's an internet commercial where it just with advisors talking to McConnell about how to soften his image, and they have one of them was doing a new Bloodhound commercial. Has a bunch of bloodhounds with him at the end. It's pretty interesting. It really has nothing to do with anything about politics or anything. It's just trying to sort of soften his image a little bit. And to some extent, the candidates can afford to do that with all the outside money that's coming in from the senatorial committees and these interest groups and things of that nature, that they can sort of really be on the attack, and it allows candidates to say, hey, this is not us. We didn't run this ad, so
We didn't do it.
we like what it says, we like the effect, but it's not on us. So I mean, and that's one of the unintended consequences of campaign finance reform. It's made this money sort of more difficult to keep up with and got it involved in a way that they didn't anticipate.
Now, Tyler, I'm curious, okay, we talked about your cohort in the 20-somethings, okay? The negativity that you see in these campaigns, is that expected? Or is it something that you hear your peers saying, oh, I'm just so tired of this negativity?
Well, coming from an academic standpoint, like Dr. Audrey has mentioned earlier, you know, we're taught in campaign management to never go negative, or at least be extremely careful. You know, don't make it your first option out of all your options. So, but you know, I think we do expect that with how close this race is.
And you're speaking in particular about the McConnell-Grimes race.
McConnell-Grimes campaign. I think we all expected it when it's that close for somebody to go negative. And you know, once the first person does, you know,
once the first salvo is
everything's
fired,
fair game then.
But you also referenced a Barron County race in one of the regional areas that has become extremely negative for a state house seat.
Yes, and I guess that surprises me.
Yeah.
That level of viciousness. I think there's a lawsuit now because somebody used was it Joe Social Security number was inadvertently put onto a commercial and that sort of thing. So, so that's one. I think the one with is it John Wayne Smith? He's having some negativity in his election too. So it's
People
trickling
get
down.
desperate, yeah.
Well, it's not only desperate, but it works.
Oh yeah.
That's
How
why we
sad
use
is
it.
that?
I know
Yeah.
we complain about negative ads, but those are the ones that we remember. Those are the ones that impact us the most. And so, if it weren't effective, then we wouldn't see so many commercials that are negative.
You know, we talked about themes and consistent themes that we see, and one that we always see, no matter the race, is that word change. Obama came in with change, and you know, they always use that because I think that's one way to differentiate themselves from their opponent. How does that hit with the 20-somethings, change?
Well, that's another one of those things that's sort of expected, you know. Like Dr. Turner said, what was it, 83% of people think that the country's on the, or Kentuckians think that the country's on the wrong track. So I see it as an easy way out, you know, just associate that word change with your campaign, and people who don't want to spend a lot of time researching the candidates or anything can, you know, see that word.
Oh, he's for change or she's for change.
Exactly.
Without,
So
okay.
it's a pretty easy strategy to use. If you know a lot of people are fed up with things, then just get that word
Cry change.
into your campaign, and you know, maybe you'll capture all these people that are sort of dissatisfied with how things are.
Do we know how many people, are there statistics or polls or research to indicate how many people actually do research the candidates, or how many people just, you know, they see how many signs do I see as I'm driving down the road, and that's a name I remember?
Well, I think it varies based upon the office. I mean, I'm pretty sure that most of the voters who are going to be participating in this state have a decent idea of McConnell versus Grimes. And when you have governor's races and the presidential race, and if Representative Guthrie, people know about those. When you get to the lower levels, it gets a little more dicey. You have some people who are really well informed, perhaps they really take an interest in state or local government. You have some people who just try to figure out whether it's Republican or Democrat, and they vote that way. So there's really no consistent pattern. It's just different people are more or less informed, and they behave a little bit differently.
I was really surprised I was at the International Festival doing some campaigning, and we'd say, "Are you going to vote in the Grimes McConnell race?" And I was really surprised how many folks didn't know Senator McConnell, who didn't know
Really?
Grimes, didn't know that
Yeah.
didn't know that there was a race going on. You know what? And so folks really do. I don't know if we have. It's so much that we've just sort of just stopped,
Tuned it out.
or we're just depending on television and not researching. I don't know. I was really surprised.
We actually found a lot of that in our survey. We asked people whether they had a favorable or unfavorable impression of the different candidates, and a lot of people indicated, probably almost a third, if I remember correctly, said they didn't have enough information to make a judgment about Secretary Grimes, which was amazing to me. And I think it points to this notion. Another thing we found is that she gets a lot of support from what I call a protest vote. Among people who support her, we'll ask her, are you voting for her because you really want her to win, or because you don't like Senator McConnell? And almost 2/3 of her support is coming from people who just don't like Senator McConnell, don't want him to get reelected. So for a lot of voters, in terms of getting back to your question about getting information, they just know, hey, she's not McConnell, that's who I'm voting for.
Right.
And they don't know anything else about her, they don't look any further than that. All they know is that it's not him, so that's who I'm going to vote for.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and I think it's probably hurt her in terms of not being able to connect with a lot of voters, and also in terms of allowing the senator to define her a little bit, in terms of perhaps giving her a specific image of being sort of a lapdog for the president if she got elected and that sort of thing, which she'd obviously want to look a little different than that, but I think it's been effective and it's worked against her in this campaign.
And that's so important, that perception,
perception.
is right out of the gate.
Perception is everything.
Once they stamp you and you're labeled as such, it's difficult
Yes.
to change that, isn't it?
Yeah.
The Republicans and the Democrats in the state of Kentucky, they really need certain districts and rely on certain districts to come through for them. And in particular, I'm talking about the Republicans having to run well in the 4th and 5th district, which they normally do, and then they hold their ground in the 1st and 2nd. What about the Democrats? How do they fare in the Louisville, Lexington?
Well, they have to do well there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think without question, if Secretary Grimes doesn't do well there, she's not going to win. She doesn't have a chance of winning if she does do well in those two areas. And I think this is one of the reasons. I think they're sort of making a misstep in terms of not getting the president to come at least help in some way. I mean, by one of the sort of the unintended consequences of her not sort of refusing to say she voted for the president, everybody knows she did. So it's kind of ridiculous to not even acknowledge it. I mean, it's not like she voted for Romney. I don't think anybody reasonably believes that. But the problem is, I mean, it's going to, among people who don't like the president, it's going to depress turnout. If she admitted that she did, it would make them stay home, theoretically. But a lot of those people who don't like the president aren't voting for her anyway. There are a lot of African Americans in that area that really do like the president and really do like her. Yeah. And if she's not willing to admit that she voted for him, there's no reason they have to come out and vote for her.
Unintended consequences.
Yeah.
So the turnout would be low. But I think she also, in the 5th district, the coal mining area,
yeah, the issue.
Yeah, she's got to hold that, which is typically Democrat, but that's been leaning more and more towards the Republicans, and so she's got to hold that if she's got to have a chance with the Louisville and the Lexington urban areas.
And the coal people.
That's going to be tough, considering the image of the president with regard to the coal miners of bankrupting coal industry and that sort of thing, which is never a good sell for coal miners if you want to get them to vote for you.
You know, and Rand Paul also ran pretty solid there in 2008 and 12.
Yep.
Yes, so that's going to be interesting to watch. And you think Rand Paul's going to run for president?
I think so.
I will say this: it lines up well for him. I mean, this is I would say if he's going to take a shot, there's a good chance this is his shot. The fundraising mechanisms is in place. It's kind of wide open from a Republican standpoint. He's differentiating himself from everybody else in terms of not quite being as hawkish and criticizing the president on everything he does. So I mean, he's setting himself up to.
He's definitely testing the waters.
Yes,
oh yeah.
Yes.
I asked him that on this very set, and he said it would be up to his wife.
Good
It was
answer.
a very diplomatic answer.
Good
Indeed,
answer.
it was.
I can say that at least among the students, you know, we all see him taking a more moderate stance, like Dr. Turner's saying, and we, you know, the general consensus among us is that he's going to run. So we'll see how it goes.
And when that consensus is spoken about, do they say, "Oh, good, he's going to run," or "Oh, he's going to run"?
I think people are excited about it. I think, you know, maybe not even on a partisan level, but because we're Kentuckians and, you know, he lives here. I think that's why people are really excited about it.
And he represents change.
Very quickly, we're running out of time. Local races of interest. Anything that stands out to you? We have city commission seats up at the Bowling Green area.
You know, we haven't heard very much
Magistrates.
about the city commissioners. I got nothing.
Probably
You got
don't anticipate
nothing?
a whole lot of change there.
Sheriff's office. Will Sheriff Peanuts Gaines stay in office?
I think
I would expect
I would
so.
expect so,
We
yeah.
think so.
The incumbents win 90% of the time.
Incumbents generally, yeah.
Okay. And what about our state representative, Jody Richards?
I think he's going to win too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Probably has that seat about as long as he wants it.
Yeah.
And so as November 4th approaches, do you think, you know, the absentee ballots, the numbers are up, and they are attributing that, of course, to the Grimes-McConnell race. People wanted to be sure. And then the early voting. What do you think?
I'm not sure what have they predicted what the turnout's going to be?
I think it's going to be tough. I mean, this is generally you'd be able to solidly predict what turnout model is going to look like, and we can say certain types of people are more likely to vote than others. But this is a sort of unique race in terms of the level of attention that it's gotten, in terms of the sort of the level of national interest and the national impact that it could have. I assume that turnout is going to be relatively high comparable to other midterm races. I mean, but it's just in terms of projecting the percentages of which different groups are going to turn out. I mean, that's going to be tough just because it's just so many different dynamics in what we generally have.
Only time will tell.
Yep.
Thanks to all of you for joining us. We've been talking with Dr. Sandra Ardrey. Thank you for being here, Joel Turner, and our student who joined us on this program, Tyler Pedigo. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to check out our Facebook page, and of course, go to our YouTube channel where you can find archived editions of this program. That's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of Kentucky Outlook. Get out and vote. Thanks for joining us.